Zanny, there on the right it says present.
Oh my god, where?
Top right.
Oh, there, present.
Yeah.
Right there.
Okay, great. This one? Okay. So, for my line of research as part of this collective project, I would like to take you through 5 sections that have informed, framed, and guided this year's work both individually and collectively. First, I will highlight my overarching interests to enter into a year-long urban investigation. Second, I will explain my theoretical framework that grounded my ways of seeing. Third, I will highlight the field work that catalyzed key insights and to inform a proposition. And fourth, I will explain the proposition itself. So to begin, I had a few key interests that allowed me to investigate and frame a particular context to see Quito's large traditional food markets as these essential sites of sociocultural productivity and sites that are essential to resist the sanitizing global trends of the demise of large traditional food markets entering into a homogenized, global, competitive tourist market. So I had 3 interests that allowed me to enter into the Ecuadorian political urban context with a very suspicious, wide, yet structured lens in order to unpack multiple schemas stemming from the node of Quito's large traditional food markets. First, I wanted to frame how highly competitive global economic forces impeded upon the enactment of these new political projects and progressive forms of urban development models. 2, I wanted to trace the future landscape of the city towards forms that conceptually and physically create forms of exclusionary economic development. And 3, I wanted to situate a contested lived reality within a city and a nation becoming and maintaining its status as a world-class tourist destination. So my first interest, the macro level forces, the big ideas. Entering into a Latin American context required a brief yet essential understanding to situating the particular geopolitical context which Ecuador was embedded in. Specifically, I was fascinated with this rise of the Latin American left that began in the late 1990s, where many nations tried to experiment with alternatives to neoliberalism, and in order to rediscover a social policy with new forms of humanistic forms of governance and development strategies. Ecuador joined this late Latin American left movement when Correa came to power in 2008, and this is where I focus on my period from 2008 to the present. And Ecuador was considered by many, along with Venezuela and Bolivia, to be one of the most radical anti-neoliberal governments. So a trend with trying to understand this macro framework of the Latin American left is this theme of transitional moments, which can be defined as these windows of opportunity for implementing new or sudden political economic restructuring processes. What is significant within this transitional spectrum across Latin America is calling for these anti-neoliberal platforms are the contradictions that arise in the hopes of shifting to these new social and human-driven developments. This has been the case in Ecuador. Ecuador's new national plan in 2008 for Buen Vivir, translated to good living, intended to serve as an alternative to the status quo of the global political economy. It incorporated platforms of the indigenous movement calling for rights for the protection of Pachamama, which is Quechua, their indigenous language for Mother Earth, and also a right to the city. So this new shift in the political agenda also saw a shift in the economic agenda. As a top goal to generate more internal wealth for Ecuador, a new national economy was brought to the fore outside of the extraction of oil and outside of international market pressures, which included anti-free trade agreements. So one way forward was through the national proposal of what was called the change of the production matrix. Key industries that were focused for this new investment in economy were refineries, petrochemicals, bio-knowledge, hydroelectric dams, and tourism. But overall, the national government began to make its own interpretations of Buen Vivir as the years unfolded. In fact, there began even a greater emphasis on economic rather than the social, environmental, and spiritual goals. The possibilities to enact the Buen Vivir development shifted towards a profit-driven economy and a continued reliance on the private sector. This is not only an impediment to economic development in a traditional sense, but also in a realization of an alternative economy itself. The government's implementation of Buen Vivir has thus received much criticism from indigenous groups, social movements, journalists, and academics alike. So this is where my research began to prompt deeper questions a discussion that is tied to the challenges that arise when alternative forms of development are pursued, which aim to transition away from resource extraction and begin to start utilizing other sectors, such as commerce, culture, and tourism, to foster ways of urban growth and the development to benefit the nation state. So this brings me to my second interest, which is the future landscape of the city, which is here where I wanted to be able to understand the future making of a city in an urban context, trying to materialize in cities more progressive, inclusive development models. To envision such a future, it became important for the national administration to dominate Ecuadorian politics with visions and goals oriented towards building a strong, independent, and democratic socialist state. One way forward was through developing a nationwide tourism and rebranding strategy stemming from the change in the production matrix. Given the significance of Ecuador's natural and cultural heritage wealth, it made significant gains in becoming one of Latin America's top destinations. In many ways, new branding and media campaigns and new international tourist advertisement, President Correa and sectors of the national administration, primarily the Ministry of Tourism, highlights the quality that make Ecuador an ideal place to invest, including the cultural heritage site, the cities of Quito and Cuenca, and well-established natural reserves such as the Galapagos Islands. However, as this progressive agenda process begins to unfold in our existing capitalist context, calling ways to strengthen for local production, to reduce imports, and to increase sustainable tourism, preparations for this world-class destination status fundamentally begin to prioritize capital accumulation over the interests of citizens demanding alternative modes of development. Seen through this lens, the new national project of Ecuador is about these external pressures that feed the restructuring of a political economy and nation-states towards private models of development. Inevitably, this drives a paradox between who the future of Ecuador's promising vision of buen vivir, or good living, is for, the international tourism audience or the city dwellers. As a result of this shift, there is an even greater urban and state consciousness to promote place-specific development strategies towards physical spaces in the city that are highly visible and communicative, and not towards these dynamic spaces of indistinguishably city spaces where there's a certain value system in the markets that becomes unrecognized within the values of the regimes of state government markets. So this brings me to my final and third interest, which is the contested lived realities of Quito's market spaces, something that is a shared collective interest among our entire group. And this is a particular way to frame the existing dialect between the built form and the actual existing living space, when new tourism and branding and development strategies explicitly make the formation of a future city is through these kind of marginalized districts and how they become excluded in the present future making of the city. The political and economic logic that drives to actually undermine local sites of social activity and culture and economic exchange is through the dynamics of Quito's rich, large traditional food market spaces. Although the Quito's market spaces are sites of commerce, socializing, and community, they're also spaces of contestation and inequalities, and have garnered systemic, strong public and government negative perceptions as spaces of negativity, unorganized, inefficient, and unsanitized enclaves. So these three interests help me to inform a very particular and theoretical framework to be able to situate these kinds of future developments in forming a city and our nation's future urban landscape, which helps to kind of compound these existing urban hardship and inequalities together for the achievement of this world-class status. This lens was explored under inter-urban competition, and I looked at this under the conditions of tourism and rebranding. So this is a particular process where local, national, and international government and private sectors coordinate strategies towards selective ways of investing in the built forms that are already considered profitable. So this includes the UNESCO historic districts or new built forms such as investing in luxury hotels, in order to redevelop urban amenities to attract international actors, including tourists and foreign developers. This conceptualization of urban life is to frame the making of a world-class tourist destination because it offers clues as to which actors become prioritized for development and redevelopment, and which sectors, urban forms, and populations remain in the background and experience exclusion, disinvestment, and displacement. So economies that desire strategies to position themselves in an already interconnected and competitive global market find ways to formulate strategies to policies to build their economic competitiveness. These strategies include, but are not limited to, these big innovation policies and place marketing strategies. A part of this toolkit are the tactics and techniques that tourism serves to promote this competitiveness and opportunities for urban redevelopment and urban regeneration projects. So for instance, the municipality's long-term land management strategies to invest in these attraction zones is in the form of profitable commercial, business, and tourist sectors, which can be argued as a tool that promotes long-term, uneven, market-oriented development that puts emphasis on the speculation and the prosperity of Quito's future. This is one tactic that begins slowly to devalue other significant city spaces that do not possess profitable values and who have limited recognition or validity in Quito's urban political agenda. So along with other scholars who pose a critical eye towards the construct of tourism-oriented spaces in Latin America and Ecuador, I too question how tourism as a strategy for economic development compounds existing urban struggles and the marginalization of the restructuring of vulnerable districts in order to justify a new and attractive urban economy. So to see these really big macro contested forces from a theoretical standpoint brought us back down to doing our field work, where we could actually start seeing these forces play out on the ground. I entered into Quito for 3 different visits, one in August of 2015 for 2 weeks, one in October for 1 week, and then in January for 1 full month. So the first trip was an introduction to Quito toward the contested site of Mercado San Roque, where the Ministry of Culture was hosting a workshop for artists called Spaces of Hope. This was Tate, Massoum, and I's first encounter with the market, where I saw my role primarily as an active observer. I used the workshop to ask multiple questions and to see the daily lives of people working and living in one of the most contested neighborhoods in the city. For me, curiosity was sparked when I was first introduced to the overarching organization that works to umbrella the leaders of 26 different organizations in the market whom represent more than 3,000 vendor workers. This organization is called Frente de Defensa y Modernización del Mercado de San Roque. They serve as a unity of associations to fight against the injustices, and they also serve as a strong point of entry to have a dialogue with urban authorities. Frente was a key organization to identify because they represent a series of urban and social justice aspirations for a very large body of workers. Then the first trip was also a very important step to informing key institutional relationships with the Ministry of Culture and Redes themselves. So as a group, we entered collectively together in October of 2015 through daily excursions to the market with our partners at Redes and the Ministry of Culture. They further expanded our insights into understanding the historical and present moments to situate the really contested struggle that is going on with the disinvestment within this neighborhood. Particularly, this included knowledge about the active prison, which is in the forefront of this photo with Mercado San Roque in the background. It was active until 2014, and since then has been a site of speculation for a luxury 5-star hotel. So this was, so after 2 trips, I started to develop a further curiosity to link the macro and the micro structural components to inter-urban competition to the parameters of the struggles of Mercado San Roque. Further, I developed an instinct to see which of other Quito's 52 markets are being more affected by inter-urban competition around this world-class destination processes. For instance, fieldwork in Quito's Historic Center made visible how these local residents working within the districts are living in and being affected by but the historic center's prime real estate pressures for development. This was dramatically revealed through the site of Mercado San Francisco's dramatic transformation for a tourist-oriented market, which sits within the historical boundaries and stands in stark contrast to Mercado San Roque. Powerfully so, Mercado San Francisco becomes the city's leading model to transform traditional market spaces. But being suspicious of this urban development trend based on speculation, sanitization, profit, and predominantly designed for a foreign audience, I identified a gap to further investigate and understand how these localized, internalized urban processes continue to aim to support the global political economy at large. This perspective was deeply invested in my longest visit in Ecuador for 3 weeks to a month in January 2016. So through an arrangement of multiple conversations, interviews, and dialogues, to gather a few insights about the contested sites of Quito's market spaces in relation to its world-class making, the city stories that I gathered came from the Ministry of Culture, Quito Tourism, the Metropolitan Institute of Heritage, a number of some key activists working with Ecuador's social movements, activist organizations working in defense of the markets, and market leaders themselves. So under this discourse of tourism and competitive urban development, these actors frame a particular spatial, economic, and political terrain that reveals certain conditions pertaining to the disinvestment and commodification of Quito's market spaces. But one particular interview that kind of brought Quito's diverse market transformation to the fore was a co-led conversation between myself and one of the key leaders of Redes Tiberes, Luis Herrera, who sadly could not join us today, when we both had a conversation with a man named Victor Sanchez. He's a leader of an organization called Cocomatai. And this is an organization that translates to the United Federation of Retail Traders and Self-Employed Workers of Ecuador. His broad perspectives on the struggles of Quito's multiple market sites reveal to me about how these market spaces confront the present and emerging urban plans, laws, and regulations, that provided me with a more holistic and critical political view while still respecting how each market was in their own situated struggle. But what Victor's conversation really sparked was the idea between Luis and I to host a focus group meeting between other market leaders so we could kind of begin to start connecting the struggle of Mercado San Roque to the struggle of other markets within the city. So we ended up, during our last final days, myself, Gamar, and Tate, Miguel, Luis, and Sinead, along with Victor Sanchez and a few other key market leaders, we had a meeting together. And one key insight that I took away from this was revealed that the struggles of the markets are isolated and situated. But from the few market organizations that we had a conversation with, it was made clear that they find it very difficult to challenge the economic aspects that can actively contribute to decline, disinvestments, and or their non-community controlled upgrades towards their spaces. And also how this powerful political urban agenda against it or thriving Quito's urbanizing processes continues to compound continuous disconnections between the markets themselves. So from field work, observations, dialogue, and experiences in the city of Quito, and a few different market sites of Quito themselves, my research can be summarized into 3 key insights. First, I've identified that out of Quito's 52 market spaces, several of them are significant sites of culture and social and economic exchange and are absolutely essential to the city's alimentation, but continue to remain outside the official political urban agenda. Second, a multi-scalar analysis of the policies, plans, and visions and strategies related to tourism and branding are excluding traditional market spaces into the future landscape of the city. This is where I began to connect the micro-struggles of the markets to the macro level of Ecuador's new national project, striving to build newness. For instance, I trace this through the ideology of Buen Vivir as the alternative mode for economic development for growth within the country, but has ultimately committed Quito and Ecuador to the generation of income and foreign investment to enact certain built urban forms. Third, that the competitive global drive to sell valuable urban assets for foreign attraction devalues and excludes socially constructed space in the city.